Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, you're certainly right. It is not all gloom and doom, but the reality for us is that even as we discuss these issues, there are still rallies going on in Iran in which the refrain is death to America, death to Israel. Even as we attempt to engage, and we hope that we get a verifiable agreement, but even as we attempt this, we still have the Ayatollah and we still have the cadres that come out and say death to the great Satan, death to the little Satan. And that's a reality that we have to face because sometimes when people communicate those types of threats, they mean it. And I mentioned my concern about the direction of the Iran talks. And of course, we understand we're still negotiating in this. And I understand you've cautioned not to judge a deal we haven't yet seen. But it's important that the administration know the committee's concerns as you negotiate. And one thing we do know is that Iran has continued to stonewall international inspectors concerning its past bomb work. And as you've acknowledged, this is a critical part of these negotiations. And it's a fundamental test of Iran's commitment. And it's been well over a year, I think. And I've talked to the Secretary General of the IAEA about this. You know, I saw press this morning. I don't know if this is correct or not, and we could go into closed session at some point to discuss it, but the concern of a secret facility. But the concern I have at the moment is what the Secretary General says. And he indicates that he is concerned about signs of military-related activities, including Iran designing a nuclear payload for a missile, inspectors in Iran, you know, the IAEA inspectors have amassed over 1,000 pages which showed research, development, and testing activities on technologies needed to develop a nuclear weapon. And of the 12 sets of questions that the IAEA has been seeking since 2011, Iran answered part of one of those. And so I'd like to ask you for a response on the concerns on the part of the IAEA and us on the committee.
Well, they're legitimate, and the questions have to be answered. And they will be unless if they want to have an agreement.
Well, yeah, we had 350 members write you expressing deep concern about this lack of cooperation. And, of course, from our standpoint, unless we have a full understanding of Iran's program, we're not going to be able to judge a year's breakout time with certainty. That's the conundrum we face here. And they're withholding that information. And without going into detail again, but as you know, I have concerns about the fact they were caught with that supersonic centrifuge, testing that, and the whole procurement
Let me just say
issue.
on that centrifuge,
Yes.
when you say supersonic, they have some advanced centrifuges that do more than the centrifuge they have today. We're well aware of that. We've been tracking all of that, and really there was a misunderstanding of the language in the interim agreement, which did allow current testing. There was a question about whether that had been current. We raised it, and immediately, within 24 hours, it ceased. There was no question, and there's been no further effort on that. In fact, the IAEA has signed off that Iran has complied with every single component of the interim agreement.
And
we raise these questions regarding the IAEA, Mr. Chairman, and as I said, they're going to have to be answered. So that's part of the discussion right now.
There's a piece today in the New York Times. Inspectors say Iran is evading questions as nuclear talks enter a crucial stage. Per my conversations with the IAEA, I know those concerns are there. I want to just turn to broadcasting reform to discuss that with you, because I know in an exchange you had yesterday in the Senate, you expressed your frustration that our effort to confront Russian propaganda is simply nowhere near where it ought to be. It's an area where Mr. Engel and I also share frustration on that. We know that Putin is dominating the essential information battle on the ground, That's not, but this isn't just about resources. It is also about what we can do with an initiative that for the Broadcasting Board of Governors to overhaul that institution and make it effective. Myself and Mr. Engel put that bill into the Senate last year. We were not able to get it up and passed. And the question I wanted to ask was for your assistance on the Senate side in getting our legislation through this year so that we can get the reform that this troubled agency needs and get up and running with the type of broadcasting that you and I think, want to see to offset what President Putin is doing right now.
All I can say is, Mr. Chairman, I'm with you 100% on this. I look forward to working with you further. I appreciate your leadership on this issue. You've been the champion of reform on the BBG, and I am absolutely committed to the reform of the BBG, and our next meeting is on April 29th. I've had long conversations with our Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy, Rick Stengel, who is very seized with some of the things we need to try to achieve. Now, there are two issues here. One is sort of the reform of the BBG, and the second is what we ought to be doing on a global basis with respect to the propaganda that's coming out of Russia. On the BBG, we've had a slight difference with you on the issue of whether or not we are whether it's improved to have a situation where you have two boards and two CEOs. I think you know I raised that. And also I think state, given our engagement with it, needs to be part of that process. I'm confident we can find a way to drive this more effectively. The bigger issue is, what is Congress prepared to do in terms of putting some resources on the line to help us do this? I have found, when I have traveled to the Baltic region or to Poland or to Bulgaria recently and elsewhere, they're just getting flooded with propaganda. And propaganda is exactly that. It's propaganda. It has the ability to affect the minds of those who hear it if they don't hear alternatives.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Secretary, we're on the same page with you. I think your request for was $1.3 million to confront Russian propaganda in this budget.
Correct.
We're on the same wavelength, Mr. Engel and I, and the committee with you on this. Just if I could just turn to one other issue that's going to be a topic here of this hearing today, and that is the question that is on our mind in terms of AUMF to ensure that the Commander-in-Chief has the authority needed to decisively defeat the enemy, and that will be part of our dialogue here with you this morning. I will turn now to Mr. Engel for his opening question.